we had raised over like $250,000 with our work, but I never paid myself a single dollar. Damn, if there's two people, right? If there's one person that's spending 100% of their time on one thing, whereas there's you who's spending 100% of your time on 5 things, which means 20% time of each, who's going to see more success in your work?
GuidED Podcast. GuidED Podcast.
GuidED Podcast.
GuidED Podcast.
GuidED Podcast. Hi, I'm Shakila Akman, and this is GuidED Podcast. GuidED Podcast.
Like and subscribe. Welcome to the GuidED Podcast, where conversations spark action and stories shape the future. I'm your host, Shakila Akman, and here at the GuidED Podcast, we break down the Sustainable Development Goals alongside the African Union's Agenda 2063, one conversation at a time. We get to sit with changemakers, policymakers, social entrepreneurs, and visionaries who have turned challenges into opportunities and ideas into action. If you're passionate about sharing or shaping the world, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment down below and leave a review and share this video with someone you think needs to hear it. Let's keep the conversation going. A special shout out to the incredible team here at Studio Bella Bella for making this recording a success and ensuring top quality production and a great learning and listening experience. Now, on to today's guest. Today we're joined by Ziyaan Virji. Ziyaan is a globally recognized youth change maker, and he's also a social entrepreneur, a previously podcast host, and an advocate for menstrual equity, youth empowerment, and education. He was the founder of For the Menstruator, a project that has impacted over 25,000 lives across 13 plus countries by promoting access to menstrual hygiene products. Ziyaan has worked in several sustainable development goals, including SDG 3, SDG 4, quality education, SDG 5, gender equality, and SDG 17, which is partnerships for all the goals. He's been a TEDx speaker, a Diana Award recipient, and has been recognized by organizations like Global Changemakers, the Bill, Melinda and Gates Foundation, and Unleash Innovation Lab. Ziyaan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I really ran out of breath trying to tell the story of how you've been able to get right here, but I wouldn't tell the story more. You will share your experience, but first we'll start with a fun icebreaker question. You've worked across so many SDGs. If each one were a superhero, which one would you claim as a secret weapon?
So, if the SDGs were a superhero, which one would I claim to be a superhero?
A secret weapon.
A secret weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Like I pick an SDG that's a secret weapon.
Yes.
I guess 17. Like partnerships. Yeah, I think I feel like most people pay attention to the first 16 and forget about 17. And so my theory of change has always been, how do you involve all stakeholders in an economy, whether it's education, whether it's business, whether it's nonprofit, media,
government,
and so forth. How do you kind of bring them on the table and align incentives? I feel like when I was doing nonprofit work, and a lot of people in nonprofit social impact space kind of approach their work from a vacuum, and when they don't agree with someone, they aren't willing to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And so you'd see a lot of nonprofit people, say we don't like the government, or we don't like businesses, or we don't like X, Y, and Z. But for me, I've always had a theory of change that has been all about how do we align incentives. And even if you may not agree with someone, I always think you can use your differences as an opportunity versus a challenge, and think about how is it that you can really build bridges in order to do that. So yeah, SDG 17, secret weapon for sure.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll start with your journey,
Yeah.
how you get to be a change maker. What sparked your journey as a change maker, and when did you begin to realize that this purpose-driven work would also be a financially sustainable thing for you?
Yeah, so when I started, I never thought of it as a financial thing for sure. I was obviously young and naive, so I started when I was 15. Um, I went to school with you and
Yeah.
the academy in Mombasa.
Yeah.
And on the last day of school, there's a lot of mosquitoes biting me, but I think that's a sign because on the last day of school, I got dengue fever. And as a result of that, long story short, I lost 3 weeks of my life. And um, after losing those 3 weeks and eventually waking up and realizing what I'd experienced, I realized that, you know, our life on this planet is very temporary.
Definitely.
And it's important that we have a purpose greater than ourselves. And so I was obviously 15 at the time and didn't really know, okay, yes, you have that realization. And it didn't happen overnight, but when you start asking yourself all these questions and figuring out what your purpose is, what legacy you want to leave behind, I didn't know what exactly it looked like, but I knew it had to be greater than myself. And so that's when I decided to kind of take that first step, and I was presented an opportunity to start my personal project at Alcom. I could do anything of my choice, just like the rest of our cohort. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I watched this documentary on Al Jazeera named India's Menstruation Man. That was the first time I learned about menstruation or the fact that women and girls around the world don't have access to products. Obviously, as a Muslim guy from an Indian background at the time, you don't really talk about periods of menstruation, right?
Yeah.
That's not a thing that guys talk
So
about. And so, um, I watched the documentary, had a chat with my mom about it, and she told me that when she was younger, she grew up in a single parent household in India, and there was a point in her life where she didn't have access as well. And so I'm like, okay, let me do something about it. I do my research. I find out 500 million people around the world suffer from this issue. An average of 1 in 10 girls in Africa suffer from this issue. And so we really need to do something about it. And that's when I decided to take some sort of action, design my very own reusable menstrual product, iterate, I grew a team. And 8 years later, we've, as you mentioned, helped 25,000 people in 10 countries. Uh, and in terms of the financial piece related to it, so we had raised over like $250,000 with our work, but I never paid myself a single dollar because obviously at the time I didn't have responsibilities as a 15-year-old. But when I did go to university in Canada, it was during COVID, and I was quite burnt out from my work because I spent basically 15 to up to like 21 doing this. Yeah, and I'm like, I was quite burnt out. And I was willing to take care of everyone else and do all this work greater than myself, but what I wasn't willing to do was take care of myself. Yeah. And so that's when I wanted to change things and do something different. And I decided to um I decided to take a step back, which is quite tough because my whole identity was associated with that. Even until today, everyone asks me about that same work, right? Yeah. When you're so attached to one singular thing. So it's quite difficult, not only externally, but also internally figuring out, okay, for the last like 6 or so years, I've just cared about one single thing, and all my conversations, everything was related to one thing, this one thing. What else do I care about? I remember my friends asked me like, hey, what's your hobby like outside of your work? And I wouldn't have a response to that. And that's when I knew, okay, something needs to change. And so I took a step back, decided to reevaluate what I wanted to do. I was in business school, and so I was always interested in the entrepreneurship side of stuff. Um, and so tried out a whole lot of ideas, everything from fintech company at some point to Web3 stuff to podcasting. And then eventually just asked myself, what would 15-year-old self Ziyaan want when he started? And the themes that came up was access to resources and opportunities. Uh, Obviously, in the context that we live in, compared to people in North America or also in the Western world, resources aren't as accessible, and there's so many gatekeepers.
Definitely.
So that was one. Another thing was a community of like-minded young people, and lastly, um, inspiration and mentorship, and someone that can share what they've been through ahead of me. And so I'm like, well, if that's what 15-year-old Ziyaan would want, why don't I just build that on my own, right? And so that's what kind of sparked leaders of today, and that's a whole other story that I'm sure we can go into.
Yeah, definitely. And you've talked about entrepreneurship, and a lot about entrepreneurship is that you have to fall in love with the problem before building a solution for people. And with these problems, you have to really be passionate about these problems. So as youth, you often get torn between for impact or for income.
Mm.
How did you, or what would you say helped you bridge the gap between those two worlds?
Yeah, so it's only until very recently that I started to bridge that gap. I remember I had applied to a tech incubator when I'd taken a step back. And my idea at the time for the incubator that I applied to was I was trying to build a fintech company that basically um, provides you cashback rewards every time you make a donation. And we had built a business model related to it, and it was going to be, we're going to incentivize people to basically donate more.
Yeah.
Um, and we built out stuff, but I remember when I put in my application, the CEO of the incubator told me that on the selection committee was one of the founders of this incubator, which is one of the most prestigious incubators in Canada. And the chair of the one of the co-founders of the incubator was like, we cannot have Ziyaan in this program because um he's just another kid that's trying to, hug the trees and save the dolphins, because it was a business tech incubator.
Yeah.
And the CEO ended up telling me, but the CEO and I connected on our nonprofit side of stuff, and he really believed in me. And so he had one golden card that he could give out, and he decided to use that golden card on me.
Oh, wow.
And even though everyone else on the selection committee didn't want, he wanted me to be in this program.
Yeah.
And so little did I know that. And so at the time, I remember they told that, and I'm like, oh shit, like maybe you cannot make impact and make money. Maybe I need to pick one.
Yeah.
But now with the work that I'm doing, I think there's a world where you can do both. There's so many examples of people around the world that are doing both, whether it's having a social enterprise, whether it's um having a business and using the money that you get to give back in different ways. But I really think, yeah, you can combine both, and I'm more than happy to share as we go how I managed to do that as well.
Yeah. All right. Now we move on to the power of partnerships and how you've been able to collaborate with global entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and youth-led movements across different parts of the world. So how have partnerships help amplify the work that you do, especially with SDGs and the public speaking skills that speak to you the most?
Yes.
How has that been for you?
Yeah, I would say so. In terms of how I have been able to use partnerships, I think in the social impact youth space, like I remember there's a point in my life where I've had a very scarcity mindset and a competitive mindset where I'd be like, oh, it's either me or them. Like we're all competing for the same amount of, awards, resources, funding, opportunities, blah, blah. But actually embracing an abundance mindset has been super helpful. And when you have an abundance mindset, there's room for everyone to win, right?
Yeah.
And so in terms of how I use partnerships, I would say for every partnership, it's very important to, as I mentioned earlier, align incentives. And so, no one will be willing to partner with you if they're not getting anything out of it. And so what you need to figure out is, how do you build a win-win situation where someone else is benefiting, but you're also benefiting, for example. So I'm trying to think of an example of a partnership we've done before. Just maybe a quick example. I remember when I think for the menstruator stuff, for example, we had partnered very closely with DTB, and DTB had given us a total of around $45,000 for our work over a span of 2 years during COVID, especially. And why would they give? They're like such established organizations in the space they're working with,
Yeah.
that have entire teams, staff,
True.
So for the why the hell would they give a 16, 17-year-old kid so much money? You know what I mean? We were not even registered as an organization.
Yeah.
And the way we were able to convince them to do that was we were providing them, we created a whole partnership package where we were like, for every pad that we distribute across Kenya, it's gotta be distributed in a bag that has a DTB logo front and center. And now for them, it's free marketing
Yeah.
because we had supported, in a span of 2 years. First year with them, we did 8,500 people. Second year was 20,000 people. And um, imagine across Kenya, girls going to school holding a bag with DTBs. It's free marketing,
Yeah.
So that's the kind of partnership that was win-win. And even though we were young, even though a lot of people were like, did not believe in us, we were able to build relationships, network, and then provide a win-win situation for someone to be willing to work with us.
That's really an amazing example, and I like the fact that you pointed out that there has to be an exchange of value. What am I getting from you, and what can I give in return?
Exactly. And to that note, like, this is a bit unrelated, but because you mentioned exchange of value, I think a lot of times in nonprofit world or SDG world or whatever you want to call it, right? Like people, every time you ask to get paid.
Yeah.
So let's say like, you have an event, you tell me, hey, I want to invite you to come speak. A lot of times you'll be like, hey, we don't have a budget. We're just a nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. But most of the times, if someone's putting up an event, they do have a budget,
Yes.
right? Yeah, especially if it's a like established organization. So never take that for an answer.
Yeah.
A way to actually respond to that is, and so first you have to like, I think, reframe how you talk about money. So instead of saying it's a cost, like to hire me, the cost is $1,000, for example. Instead, you should be like, hey, remove cost out of your vocabulary. It's an investment, right? And why is it an investment? Because by them hiring you and you having an impact on the attendees of the conference, they're clearly seeing a return on the investment,
Definitely.
So, and they're gonna see some sort of impact from that. So you gotta remove cost from your vocabulary when talking about money. It's always an investment. And then second thing is, let's say, okay, you're like, you pitch to them, you tell them this is the investment, and they're like, we still don't have any money. Then you're gonna be like, hey, I completely understand. If you really want to do it, like if you as individuals really want to do the event, let's say you see this could be an opportunity to pitch to the audience or whatever it is, build your brand, then you should be like, okay, I completely get it. But in return, because there's exchange of value, how about you give me a testimonial instead? Or how about you refer me to another organization that's hosting an event? Or how about you post about me on your social media channels?
Yeah.
Like, then definitely, because you're spending your time, there has to be an exchange of.
Exchange of value.
So a lot of people are in the space that we're talking about, like I never had those tools before too. They're like, okay, free event, sure, I'll do it. Like, I get to speak, what?
Exposure.
Yeah. But like, at some point, you gotta pay your rent. How much time are you gonna, be spending doing stuff for exposure? You know what I mean? So that's just some like tools in terms of how to navigate when someone says, oh, they don't have a budget, or hey, do this for us for free.
So you spoke about the partnerships that you've done. How has it? You could speak on one example where it has helped you unlock funding or resources that you otherwise couldn't access alone. Especially, I like the one you touched on, the newsletter, and how it's opened up opportunities for more partnerships and just being able to see the problems that youths face in a different lens.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, like we were chatting earlier about how so to give people that don't know some context, we started a newsletter. So when I started Leaders of Today, we started off as a podcast actually, and a lot of the young people that are listening to the podcast like, hey, it's great to have inspiration, and listen to all these stories, but how do we actually get started? Like, how do you what's step number one after listening to this? And they were like, they kept asking me. I'm like, okay, how do I solve that? And I'm like, well, let me start a newsletter, and the newsletter I can break down the one-on-ones and share all the tips and tools that I've learned in the process, as well as share opportunities. And because of my work, I would in nonprofit, I'd have this notes that's like goes on and on, that I would save links of all these opportunities. And I would share with my friends if there were any that were relevant to them. And so I'm like, I knew there's like people always want opportunities. How can I share it even more? And so I'm like, let me compile this on a Google Sheets and share it out on my LinkedIn. And I kept doing that, and in a very short span of time, we had posts go viral, and we our Google Sheets had 3 million impressions. Out of those, now up to 80,000 people, over 80,000 people have converted into newsletter subscribers. Now, most people, when they see that kind of reach, obviously because they are just trying to make money as soon as they can, because they're not getting paid for any of the other work, would just monetize it, put the newsletter behind a paywall, put the opportunity behind a paywall, and be like, hey, to actually you need $5. But that's completely contrary to what I initially wanted to do, which was democratize access to this. So what I tried to figure out was how is it that we can, still monetize it, still fund it, make it sustainable, because a lot of people in this opportunity space, they'll start doing something, get traction, and then 6 months in, 1 year in, they'll just die because they don't have a business model associated with it, and it doesn't make sense to spend like 15 to 20 hours each week updating these. And so what I decided to do is, one, we do monetize our newsletter, but we take a different model where we run ads on it. But what I really see the power of it is, I see the distribution long term. And in the whole content and thought leadership space, what you're really in public speaking as well, you're not really selling the content. The content is something that anyone can do. And there's so many content creators out there, but what you're really selling is trust. And so it's really a trust business. So for me, I'm providing all these resource opportunities, writing each week, so that I can build trust and see that distribution for when I do start a business, or when I do launch my book, or whatever else I decide to sell in the future. These can be my potential customers, and I'm validating my ideas and problems as I with this 80,000 people. And if you just run the numbers, let's just say 10% of the audience converts. That's 8,000 people, and I sold a product for $5. Uh, 8,000 times 5, you can just you can just run the math there, right? That's like that's $40,000 right there, and it's just 10% convert.
Definitely.
So what I'm really thinking is, I'm thinking like, although all the people on the news are young people, I'm thinking 5-10 years down the line, when these same people are CEOs of companies, are in the job market, have more disposable income, that's gonna be a very different game when I do that. So I think, and one last thing on the newsletter is, I think the real asset of it right now is using it as leverage. And so I was sharing with you this on our way here, but when one part of my business is speaking, and when there's two speakers, one that is just speaking on content, there's another speaker that says the same stuff, but he also has an 80,000 subscriber newsletter, and he also has this opportunity database. And you're pitching yourself as, hey, this is not just a one-time talk. It's all your young people will also get access to this opportunity database and this community. That's a very different conversation,
Definitely.
So I think really understanding and being more strategic about this kind of stuff. I was never strategic about it before, when I would just look at stuff through the nonprofit lens. So like, hey, I just want to make an impact and change the world. Like I always say, a broke person can never change the world. I mean, you can, sure, like you can, I don't know, fast for like your whole, like, but really, are you really gonna have like systematic level impact? Are you really gonna be able to align incentives? Are you really gonna be able to do things at a scale that you like? Probably not. Because your incentives are not aligned. You're gonna be doing all these things, but you can't make your rent, and I see a lot of people in like nonprofit SDGs who are doing such amazing work, but they're just working minimum wage jobs at like a coffee shop. And so externally it looks great. Oh my God, I'm changing the world. But like you're struggling to make your ends meet. And so it's really important to be strategic. It's really important to take an approach where you are aligning incentives, you are building leverage for yourself, you are building distribution, and in a world of like social media and tech and AI, it's way easier to do that than ever before, right? And so just thinking about how you can approach that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important. And now moving on to the next. If a listener has just started an initiative and they want to create an impact, what's one unconventional way they could start monetizing or building a path to sustainability within their first year? Especially the fact that you've been able to build your newsletter from scratch.
Yeah.
Could you share your experience on that?
So what I will share is one of the big advices one of my mentors has given me is, I remember, I don't know if you know Sahil Bloom, but I had a chance to meet him and I was telling him about where I was at in life, and he introduced this idea to me of leverage.
Yeah.
And when he introduced me this idea, I went back home and I did research on leverage, and I came across this framework of the 4 C's of leverage. Now, the 4 C's of leverage are the first one is capital, second C is code, third C is collaboration, and fourth C is content. Now, the idea of leverage is how do you, we all have equal number of time, right? We all have
24 hour day.
right? But how is it that one person is making way more money or is way more productive with their 24 hours than someone else?
Yes.
Right? If everyone's working the same number of hours, how is that someone seems way more success than the other? That's where the concept of leverage comes from. How is it that with 1 unit of time, you can be have way more output than someone else? And that's where the 4 C's come. So capital, for in your example, this person first year of whatever, they don't have capital.
Yeah.
But in an ideal world, if you have more capital, you can do way more. You can hire people, you can do, you can build, you can do X, Y, and Z. Second C is code. If you have technical skills, you can build a product or a platform and make the machines do work for you.
Yeah.
So when you're sleeping overnight, the machine's still running, you know what I mean?
True.
And so you're able to now, do more with your time. Third C is content. Now, for me, that's the one. So I didn't have capital, I didn't have code, but I didn't even have a social media following. But the barriers to entry to creating a social media following is simply just posting every day.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, let me try that. And with content, the two types of content that are there is either entertainment or education. Because the amount of content you need to provide value to your audience, right? Entertainment value or educational value. And so for me, I didn't want to do random TikTok dances. Yeah. I just would embarrass myself. So I'm like, why not, provide educational value? And that's why I created that opportunities list. And without even trying too hard, it got very feedback, and I was able to build leverage.
Yeah.
And that's how I was able to reach, 3 million young people around the world.
Yeah.
80,000 subscribers and so forth. Last one is collaboration. So we live in a world again that we're so connected, right?
Yes.
And there's someone that's an expert in every single thing. And yes, you can spend time learning all these skills, or you can collaborate with someone else that does.
Yeah.
And if you have a good team, you're able to do way more than you can, right? So I think collaboration, especially as a young person in that situation, figure out the right team members to surround yourself with. And again, you want to provide incentives. If you want to be sustainable, you want to provide incentives to your team members, whether it's a cut on how much, either paying them if you can, either giving them equity, either giving them some leadership title, whatever it is that they really want, giving them that sort of incentive, and then going from there. So yeah, out of the 2 C's, I leverage
Collaboration.
and content. And the crazy part is, if you get a 1 C, it leads you to the next. So like with content collaboration, so you put out content, you have all this access to all these people, now you can find your next team members through that. You got collaboration. From collaboration, you'll have capital. And from capital, you can hire someone to do your code for you. Yeah. So, and then when you have all 4 C's unlocked, then you're basically unstoppable, right?
Definitely.
And so I think that's a tool that this young person that would reach out, I think that I would give them. Yeah.
Definitely. I myself learned that. I've never done that. I've never known about that. So you've worked across diverse contexts, and what have you noticed about how youth-led change makers or organizations are evolving in Africa or even beyond?
How are youth-led changemakers evolving in Africa and beyond? That's a good question. I guess with the introduction of AI, um, things are getting easier. Barriers to entry is even lower. Information become more accessible, which means that creates opportunities for more people to get involved. For you to have more reach, for you to go faster, and so I think that's a factor to consider for sure. I think from 8 years ago when I started to now, there's way more opportunities that are out there. There's way more people that are willing to share. There's way more information. There's way more funding. People actually now take young people more seriously than ever before. I remember when I was starting, like, people like, you're 15, like, why should we be talking to you, you know? And people have outright told me, like, you're too young to be on a board, or you're too young to be in a meeting, or whatever it is, right?
But now you get to meet
Whereas,
them even.
yeah, whereas now, like, we're making progress, and there's way more opportunities for young people. And if anything, people think it's like, it's kind of cool to have a young person on your board, or you have a youth council, have like all these things. And so there's way more opportunities.
Yeah.
I think in Africa specifically, based on my experience and understanding, um, it's an exciting time. I mean, we are the population we have the youngest population. They've seen those stats of, like, the young people under 25 in Africa will be the biggest, um, which is going to be exciting. And we have new ideas. We saw some great, success, or great young people come together in Kenya last year with what happened. And we were able to make some sort of progress there, even though it was not enough. But that's the power of young people, and we have nothing to lose. We're fearless. We come together, we collaborate.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real opportunity, and there's lots of innovation and stuff happening in that kind of space.
Definitely. Um, if you could share this, what's a moment you said no to an unpaid opportunity because it didn't honor your value or it did not align with what you were doing, and what did you learn from it?
Unpaid opportunity. There's so many. I would say I kind of touched on this question in terms of how to deal with that. And what I've, like, all that I shared was based on what I've learned.
Yeah.
And I think the best part of an unpaid opportunity is, approaching it with, I want some sort of exchange in value. And if they're not willing to provide that, then be like, hey, it's not a good fit. However, I'm willing to recommend another great young change maker that would be a better fit for this opportunity.
Sure.
Which I'm sure there are multiple out there, and so you don't leave a bad taste in the person. In fact, you're even being more helpful. You're being a resource, right? And so I think that's, in terms of unpaid opportunities, that's the only additional other thing that I'll share. I'd say no to a bunch of even paid opportunities that have not been aligned, right? I think the biggest thing of our time, especially as young people that are listening, is focus. I used to struggle with it a lot. I spent the last 3 days here in Mombasa at the school, and there's so many young people that are like, hey, and I used to be the same. I'm like, I'm doing for the menstruator, I'm doing climate, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And you think that you having all those multiple things, you think it sounds like it gives you more credibility, but in reality, you're just wasting time. If there's two people, right? If there's one person that's spending 100% of their time on one thing, whereas there's you who's spending 100% of your time on 5 things, which means 20% time of each. Who's going to see more success in their work?
The person who's spending half the time.
Exactly. And those are the people that you're competing with, even though, yeah, abundance mindset, but we do live in a competitive world. And we do live in a world where, like, every man fends for himself.
Right.
And so you gotta, like, I think there's an element of focus that's extremely important. And I've said no to so many things because it hasn't been aligned with my goals and my what I wanted to do at the time. And so I think that's also super important to consider.
That's an interesting perspective. But don't you think that at this day and age, especially for youth who are just trying to figure out, maybe straight out of high school, trying to figure out their life, they don't even know which SDG to focus on.
Yeah.
They've experienced a whole lot of things and they don't know what to focus on, and trying to explore different options is the best thing.
Yeah, I think yes and no. It depends on the stage and the specific circumstance of the person and what they're going through. I think in the early days when you're still still trying to figure out, there's definitely value in trying out a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Um and because like I did it myself when I took a step back for the menstruator, I wrote down a list of all the hypotheses of potential career paths. I had around 2 years to figure out my third and fourth year to figure out what I'm gonna do after I graduate. And I knew I had a criteria. My criteria was I don't want to work for anyone else. I wanted to be impactful, and I want to have autonomy and independence, and it has to be aligned with my values. That was my criteria. And then I wrote down every single potential hypothesis of what I wanted to do. And instead of framing it as this is my career path, I just framed it as experiments. And what I ended up doing was I had this full list. I wish I even started earlier, but I would do 6-week sprints where I would test out each hypothesis. So like podcasting, newsletter agency, speaking business, podcast, I mentioned podcast, tech company. Yeah, I had all these things on my list, and I would set a goal for the end of the 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, I would talk to everyone in the space. I would try out the actual thing. Uh, I would try to shadow someone. I would do all these different things and set a very specific, measurable goal for myself. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I would ask myself, you know, is this something that I want to spend another 6 weeks on? Or is my hypothesis invalidated and I can move on to my next experiment? And by the time I graduated, I had done all these 6-week sprints and I had data to back it up that I was able to finally come to a decision and figure out what I want to do for work and get paid for it, and built all these relationships along the way. And I think that in your early days, it's important to experiment. But when you're within those 6 weeks and when you have finally decided and made a commitment, you gotta focus. Can't be doing like 5 things at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And doing multiple things is not. It sounds great, but it's BS. Like every time someone tells me they're doing this, this, and this,
So what are you doing?
yeah, and I can tell they're just saying that to make them look credible, but in reality, it's BS.
Oh.
And so, like, why would you want to be doing like 5 things if you're making good money and impact and are happy in one thing? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important that you shared that. That's an important resource our audience can really take with that, especially someone who is starting off or even someone who has just pivoted a lot and still trying to figure that out. Thank you so much for sharing. What do you wish someone told you at the very beginning of your journey about money, boundaries, and value?
Oh, that's a good one. Money, boundaries, value. I would say people did tell me this. A lot of people told me the whole thing of you can't be a broke you can't be a broke person shaping the world. Or yeah, you can't be a broke person changing the world. And at the time I'm like, nah, I just wanna change the world and do all these impactful things and I don't really care about money. And like you guys are just hating on me and like just don't want me to succeed. Um, but when rent is due in a couple of days and your landlord's like, you get that notification, you're like, I don't know if I care about the world that much, you know what I mean? But and it's not obviously that black and white. Um, I think you can do both. But yeah, I wish someone told me to be more strategic with how I approach stuff. Someone told me People always told me the power of networking and relationships, but never really gave me the right tools for it. Um, I wish there was a point in 2019 when I was still at Akam that I was getting a lot of success and external eyeballs and stuff. Like we in the same year we had, won a bunch of awards. We mentioned, got a lot of press. We got BBC and a bunch of like even right now, if you search my name, a lot of the press would be from that year.
Demonstrated.
And we're getting all this traction, and I was getting to travel around the world and speak and do all these things. But a lot of the relationships were being navigated through someone else. So like it'd be a teacher at a school or a mentor or someone in the middle. I wish I took more ownership of those relationships because I met such cool people, but now that I'm older, I don't even have access to them. So one thing I would do is definitely take ownership of those relationships. I would spend more time maintaining those relationships versus trying to build new ones. And there's all these tools that I learned later on that I always share with young people in terms of how do you actually follow up after a coffee chat? How do you actually make sure that you remember birthdays of everyone that you've met and worked with? How do you actually, right after you meet someone, send them a handwritten letter? Like all these small things, how do you remember small details about someone that they mentioned, their family, their kids? Because this is in business and in anything that you do, it's all about relationships. But and everyone says that,
True.
but no one actually gives you the actual tools on how to do it.
Yeah.
And people that are successful have a systematic process. So like now, every Friday and Saturday, depending on the week, I spend time just on my relationships. So like I use a software called X, and I've put in all my relationships in there, including my friends, and I have their birthdays on it. It sends me a reminder that depending on the friend and my relationship, I'm like, okay, Shakila, I wanna be in touch with you every month. Whereas my closer relationships every week, and it sends me a reminder, and then I do it every Friday or Saturday. And these are things this is how you build relationships. This is how you maintain it. It's not just like posting on LinkedIn or reaching out every time. Like what I used to do before is I used to just reach out to people anytime I needed something, and then I completely forget about it. And the next time I need something, I do that.
Yeah.
And the way I like to think of relationships now is relationships are like a bank account, right? And so every time you have an interaction with someone, you're making a deposit, right? And ideally the deposit is you want to provide value.
Yeah.
So it could be sending a podcast, sending an article, it could be checking in, sending in a message, hey, how are you doing? Every time you do that, it's a deposit. Every time you ask for something in return, you're withdrawing from the bank account.
Yes.
Now what a lot of times what people do is they just reach out when they're trying to withdraw from a bank account. But how do you withdraw from an empty bank account? You're gonna go in the negatives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe the first time someone you haven't made a deposit and you're making a withdrawal, and people are gonna be like, okay, sure, I'll help you like go in the negatives a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you keep doing that and then keep doing that and then keep doing that, it's gonna at some points there's a limit on your credit card, on your bank card. You know what I mean? They're gonna close your bank account. They're gonna close their relationship with you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to say relationship transactions, it shouldn't be that way. But the reality is that's how we operate as humans, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to be super like strategic, super like you still want to be authentic and uh build genuine relationships that are authentic. But that's a tool I wish I had when I was 15 and meeting all these cool people. I would have made like so many deposits in all these 80 areas.
Yeah.
But I never did. I would just reach out to people when I needed help, and now I'm in the negatives with so many people, for example, right? So that's a tool I wish I had. Um, uh, I wish I knew how to, like, I think a number one skill I wish I learned earlier is sales. Um, and sales applies to whether you're running a nonprofit, whether you're running a business, whether you're running um, anything that you're doing, whether you're in a job. Like, the art of selling is, it sounds super simple. I was like, yeah, sales is simple. Like, I've done pitch competition, but that's not really what sales is. How to actually build the pipeline? What's a CRM? How to how to come up with a sales script? Like, there's so many things that I wish that I learned earlier that I would have definitely applied even in my nonprofit work. Um, and so those are some things that I wish I was told a bit earlier. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. I don't know how you read my mind. I was about to ask, how do you maintain your relationships? And that has really
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Finally, what message would you leave to an or every young change maker listening to us, who is trying to live a life of purpose and but also wants to pay the bills? What would you tell them?
I would say there's a couple things, and even just kind of going to your previous question, which I feel like I didn't fully answer around value. You talk about value. The way I look at value in terms of a very uh strategic lens is, as a young change maker, you need to put a value of number of dollars to every hour you spend.
Yeah.
So let's say you're 18 years old, your goal, you're still in school, you're doing X, Y, and Z, and your goal is to make $50,000 this year. Now, if you do quick math, $50,000 divided by 50 weeks, that's divided by 50 weeks, that's $1,000
Yeah.
a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? And let's say every week you're outside of everything that you're doing, you'll have 10 hours to spare.
Yeah.
So, $1,000 divided by 10, that is $100.
Mm.
So, if that's what you think you're worth, every time an opportunity is presented to you,
You lose.
you need to ask yourself, how much time am I spending on this?
Yeah.
And not only the time you're doing the actual thing, like right now, we're doing this podcast for an hour, but we spend time, coming here,
Communicating.
commuting, yeah, talking on email, back, the editing, posting after, calculate all those hours. So let's say you spend like 10 hours with whole process, and my number is $100. So 100 times 10, that's $100,000. I need to ask myself if engaging in this opportunity is worth $1,000. And it may not be in cash, but it may be in views that we get online, or it may be in the testimonials that you give me, or whatever it is, right? If someone doesn't have budget, you ask them for three other things in return,
Yes.
right? Testimonial, referral, or a social media post. Um, so I wish I was told that earlier. Cause I spent hours obviously doing a lot of free work, and obviously the early days, you're building credibility. You need to prove your worth, and that number for you won't be $100 an hour, but it could be $10, and it could be $5 an hour. It still is worth some amount of time.
Yeah.
So it's important to ask yourself that question. In terms of what advice in general for someone, a change maker that's trying to navigate, is you have a unique set of skills and you decided to take the certain path because you want to do something bigger than yourself. But you won't be able to, you're not able to fill someone else's cup if you have an empty cup, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to ask yourself, how are you filling your own cup? And how is it that you fill your own cup? There's a lot of factors within your own cup. There's the financial aspect, there's the personal well-being aspect, use physical, spiritual, mental well-being.
Yeah.
There's a time aspect. There's all these different things that you need to consider. Think about what that looks like for you. I also do believe that tomorrow never comes. And if you want to get started,
No.
and yeah, if you want to get started, don't wait until tomorrow, get started today. Young people are not only leaders of tomorrow, we're leaders of today, right? And so really think about how you can, like, you're saying all these things of, I want to get paid as a change maker. But like, in order for you to do that, you need to learn how to do that. You need to spend the time. And in nonprofit world, one thing that always frustrates me is there's a lack of accountability. One thing that frustrates me in the youth nonprofit change maker space is that there's a lack of accountability.
Mm.
And a lot of people, including myself, I was very guilty of this, is you say you're going to do X thing,
Mm-hmm.
you won't do X thing, you'll maybe do 10% of X thing,
Mm.
but you'll get away with it because you're still doing good in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of change makers, I hate to say this, but I was guilty of this again, are some of the most lazy people I met. And they give themselves a false narrative that they are making progress, making impact, making success because it's a good thing.
Mm.
But if you take the same kind of approach, if you take the same kind of approach in other industries, it's cutthroat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in nonprofit, there's no accountability. You can say, "Oh, I've helped X many number of people," right? People throw out all these numbers in nonprofit work and say, "I've done X, I've done Y, blah blah blah." But no one's actually investigating and looking into if those numbers are real or not.
Yeah.
No one's actually like putting, like, when you're applying for all these opportunities and stuff, no one's actually going into saying, "Oh, you see, Ziyaan saying he's helping 25,000 people, but if we go to every single community that he said he has helped, has he really helped? Are they still using his product?"
Yeah.
No one really does that. And so because where it's in business, if you're saying, "Hey, we have X client and X client and we've done this much business," people can go and see your bank account and there's proof in the pudding, you know what I mean? So I think as change makers and nonprofit, and again, I'm only saying this and I'm confidently able to say this because I was guilty of doing the same exact things. Is one, don't be lazy. And the laziness may be coming from being burnt out. And don't give yourself the false hope and a false narrative and tell a false narrative externally that you're making an impact when you're not.
Yeah.
And it's important that I think there's the more investment and the more money and more opportunity that come into the space,
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely important that we hold young changemakers, even though they're young and they're still figuring it out, hold them accountable to the type of stuff they're talking or claiming to do. But what's the point in living in a world where everyone's on paper, from what they're saying, changing the world, but when you go into communities, the same exact problems exist.
True.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'll just end at that point.
No, that's really awesome. Holding on to your word and ensuring that the numbers that are being projected in social media or whatever is actually what is on the ground.
Exactly. And sure, let's say you get away with BSing your numbers out there for grant applications, whatever it is. Let's say you do that. But what would be the point if you are, even though it's just an external number,
Yeah.
internally, if you look at your bank account or if you look at what you've actually done, you know yourself that you're lying.
Yeah.
You know, what would be the point of that? You're just telling yourself a false narrative and you think you're making impact or you're making money or doing X, Y, and Z, but you're not.
I think we can see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even just for yourself, like, why would you want to build evidence for yourself that you're not the kind of person, you know?
Mm. That's interesting. One fun question before we wrap up. If you could teleport yourself to one SDG project in the world, anywhere in the world for one day, where are you landing and what are you doing?
That's a really good question. One SDG project. There's so many around the world.
Which one has spoken to your heart the most?
Spoken to my heart the most. I don't know. I feel like the longer you spend in the space, the more the more you kind of lose your feelings too. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it becomes very numb. Like all the issues, they just kind of become numb because you've seen the worst of the worst.
True.
I would love to one day see the incredible work that's been done in places of conflict and war, and I think that's, in terms of how bad can it get, I think that's one of the examples. And there's so many, that stuff that's not even in your control. You can never get out of it. It's just like life, and you can't even physically go anywhere, you know what I mean? So I would love to one day like help and be of support. It's like super sad to see what's happening in all these areas of conflict. But yeah, there's so many SDG projects. It's hard to pick one, but if in terms of problem space, I think that's definitely one.
Conflict and war.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's super unrelated to like what I do now. But yeah,
Which is really great.
yeah.
So one last question that we always ask here at the GuidED podcast: who's one change maker you think we should feature and why?